There's a certain type of woman a man never forgets. No matter how many years pass, no matter how many relationships he has afterward, even if he gets married, has kids, builds an entire life with someone else, this woman remains. She lives in a corner of his mind that no one else can access, and he doesn't understand why. Carl Jung discovered the answer back in 1921. Andrew Huberman has validated that discovery with cutting-edge neuroscience in 2024. And what they've revealed is going to completely change how you understand male attraction. Because the truth is, it's not about beauty and it's not about intelligence. It's not about what she did or didn't do. It's about something much deeper. Something that operates on the level of Jung's collective unconscious and Huberman's neurohormonal level. And when you understand what that is, you'll realize why some women leave a permanent mark on the male psyche, while others are completely forgotten in a matter of months. But before I reveal this secret, I need to warn you about something. What I'm about to share here isn't theory, it isn't opinion. It's the convergence of 100 years of profound psychology with the most advanced neuroscience available. And the implication of that is going to shock you. Because it means unforgettable feminine energy isn't something you do, it's something you are. And even more disturbing, it means that most women have been conditioned by modern society to suppress that exact energy. Jung called this the anima. And he said something that academia has hidden for decades. He said that the anima is the factor of greatest importance in a man's psychology whenever emotions and affections are in action. Always, but not how sometimes. Always. Think about that for a second. The greatest psychologist of the 20th century declared that there's a feminine force operating inside every man that determines how he experiences emotions. And when a woman on the outside resonates with that internal force, something extraordinary happens. The man isn't just looking at a woman anymore, he's looking into a mirror of his own soul. And that mirror has the power to heal him or destroy him. Huberman explained the neurological mechanism behind this in his episode on the science of love, desire, and attachment. He showed that there are 3 distinct neural systems operating in attraction: lust, driven by testosterone and estrogen; attraction, driven by dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin; and attachment, driven by oxytocin and vasopressin. But here's what Huberman discovered that connects directly with Jung. The hormonal cascade that a woman activates in a man depends on which stage of the anima she represents to him. And that changes absolutely everything. Let me explain the 4 stages of the anima that Jung mapped out, because when you understand this, you'll finally comprehend why that specific woman got etched into that specific man's mind forever. The first stage Jung called Eve, and it's the most primitive level, purely biological, purely sexual. A woman who represents only Eve activates testosterone and dopamine in the man. It's intense in the moment, and addictive even, but it's also completely replaceable, because any woman who activates the same circuits can occupy that place. And that's why men who get stuck in the first stage of the anima jump from woman to woman. They're seeking the same dopaminergic rush, and each new woman offers that temporarily, until the novelty wears off, and they seek the next. But here's where it gets interesting. Men who find a woman representing the second stage of the anima experience something completely different. Jung called this second stage Helen. Like Helen of Troy, the woman for whom wars are fought. The woman who inspires art, poetry, romantic obsession, but still without moral depth or personal responsibility. A woman who represents Helen activates not just dopamine, but also the circuits of romantic and aesthetic fantasy. The man doesn't see her as she really is. He sees her as an ideal, a projection of his anima. And this creates the phenomenon that both Jung and Huberman documented. The man idealizes the woman as perfect, then gets disillusioned when she fails to live up to the anima image. And here's the crucial part. Even after the disillusionment, she remains in his mind. Why? Because she touched something deeper than logic. She touched the unconscious, and the unconscious does not forget. Huberman explained this in neurological terms. When a man experiences what he calls positive delusion in relation to a woman, the brain's reward circuits get permanently altered. Dopamine creates neural pathways that associate that specific woman with intense pleasure. And those pathways don't disappear easily. But hold on, because what comes next is even more profound. The third stage of the Anima Jung called Mary. Like Mary, mother of Jesus. Here the woman represents something beyond the sexual and the romantic. She represents the sacred feminine, the capacity to nurture, to heal, to transform. A woman who represents Mary to a man activates oxytocin at levels that Huberman calls extraordinary. And oxytocin does something that no other hormone does. It creates bonds that transcend logic, time, and even physical presence. A thematic review published in 2024 in Science Direct examined the interaction between oxytocin and sex hormones. What they discovered connects directly with Jung. The activity of sex hormones modulates the release of oxytocin and the activity of oxytocin receptors. This means that a woman with high feminine energy, with estrogen and progesterone flowing naturally, amplifies the production of oxytocin in the man she touches. And here's the fact that's going to shock you. Men need 2 to 3 times more physical touch than women to maintain the same levels of oxytocin. So, when a woman with elevated feminine energy offers nurturing presence and touch to a man, she's literally altering his brain chemistry in a way that he rarely experiences. She becomes associated with a neurobiological state that he can't replicate otherwise. And that's why he never forgets her. It's not romanticism. It's neuroscience. But there is a fourth stage. And this one is the rarest, and also the most powerful. Jung called it Sophia, wisdom. The woman who represents Sophia to a man transcends all previous levels. She integrates the sexual, the romantic, the sacred, and adds something more: spiritual depth, expanded consciousness, connection with something larger than both of them. A woman who represents Sophia activates in the man not just hormones, but what Jung called the process of individuation. She becomes a catalyst for his psychological transformation. There's a certain type of woman a man never forgets, no matter how many years go by, no matter how many relationships he has after. Even if he gets married, has kids, builds an entire life with someone else, this woman remains. She lives in a corner of his mind that no one else can access, and he doesn't understand why. She forces him to confront his shadow. She inspires him to integrate parts of himself he had previously repressed. And that's why this type of woman is absolutely unforgettable. Because she didn't just touch his body or his mind. She touched his soul. And the soul has eternal memory. Now, here's the question you're probably asking. How does a woman become that kind of feminine energy? How does she access these deeper levels of the anima? And here's where the answer gets complex. Because Carl Jung was very clear about one thing. The anima cannot be manipulated. It cannot be faked. It's an archetypal energy that flows through a woman who has done her own inner work. A woman who's disconnected from her own femininity cannot activate a man's deep anima. She might activate Eve, maybe even Helen of Troy, but Mary, mother of Jesus, and Sophia, they require something more. They require that the woman has integrated her own feminine shadow, that she's accepted her vulnerability, that she's found her own spiritual depth, and this explains something that Andrew Huberman documented in his lab. Women with chronically elevated levels of cortisol, the stress hormone, have reduced oxytocin production. And without naturally flowing oxytocin, they cannot create the deep bonds that make a man remember them forever. Modern society is creating women with high cortisol and low oxytocin, women who are always rushing, always proving something, always competing. And these women, however successful they may be outwardly, often fail to create lasting emotional connections with men. Not because men are superficial, but because the neurobiology of lasting attraction requires a specific type of feminine energy, an energy that most modern women have been trained to suppress in the name of equality or independence. Let me be clear here. I'm not saying women should be submissive or dependent. Jung was very clear that Anima integration benefits both genders. And Huberman emphasizes that hormonal health isn't about gender conformity. What I am saying is that there's an authentic feminine energy that's been lost. An energy that has nothing to do with weakness and everything to do with receptivity, intuition, nurturing presence, and deep emotional connection. And when a woman reclaims that energy, she becomes magnetic in a way that transcends physical appearance or external achievements. Now, I'm going to reveal something that psychologists avoid discussing publicly: the phenomenon of anima projection. Jung discovered that when a man finds a woman who resonates strongly with his internal anima, he projects this archetypal image onto her. He doesn't see her as she really is. He sees the anima. This creates what we call love at first sight, that instantaneous and overwhelming attraction that some men experience with certain women. It's not magic. It's archetypal projection. But here's the part that Jung emphasized, and that Huberman has validated neurologically. The projection creates a permanent mark. Even when the man eventually sees the real woman behind the projection, the emotional imprint remains. And that's why men often say things like, "She was different from all the others," or "I've never felt that way with anyone since." They're describing the experience of anima projection, a unique neurological and psychological experience that literally alters the structure of the brain. But wait, because there's an even deeper layer that most people completely ignore. The quality and health of a man's anima are determined by his early experiences with significant women in his life, especially his mother. This was something that Jung studied extensively, and that modern neuroscience has validated in surprising ways. Dr. Alan Shaw, who appeared on the Huberman Lab in November of 2024, explained how the right hemisphere of the brain, which dominates development in the first 24 months of life, is shaped primarily by the relationship with the maternal figure. This shaping creates the template for all future relationships. This means that a man with an emotionally available mother develops a healthy anima. He can recognize and connect with women who represent the highest stages of the anima, Mary and Sophia. But a man with an emotionally absent or inconsistent mother develops a wounded anima. He might get stuck in the Eve or Helen of Troy stages, eternally seeking something he can't quite define, something he missed in childhood, and projects onto adult women. And here's the crucial revelation. A woman who represents the elevated stages of the anima has the power to heal that wound. When a man finds a woman who offers the kind of nurturing presence he didn't receive in childhood, something profound happens in his nervous system. The attachment circuits that were malformed in childhood begin to be rebuilt. Neuroplasticity allows new connections to form, and this reconstruction is experienced by the man as something absolutely transforming. And that's why these men never forget these women. It's not just attraction, it's healing. A healing that happens at the deepest level of the nervous system. Now, let me tell you about a phenomenon that Jung documented, and that few psychologists have the courage to discuss: the cycle of idealization and disillusionment. When a man projects his anima onto a woman, he sees her as divine, perfect, the embodiment of all his conscious and unconscious desires. This creates an emotional intensity that few relationships ever experience. But inevitably, the real woman begins to appear from behind the projection. She makes mistakes. She has flaws. She doesn't match the perfect image he created. And here's where something interesting happens. Less psychologically developed men feel anger. They feel betrayed, as if the woman has deceived them, when in reality, she was never the image he projected. She was always herself. But more developed men go through something different. They begin to integrate the anima. They begin to recognize that the feminine energy they were seeking wasn't in the woman. It was in themselves. And that's exactly what Jung meant when he spoke about the process of individuation. The unforgettable woman isn't the destination. She's a portal. A portal for the man to find the femininity within himself. Huberman would explain this in terms of the default mode network, the brain network that processes internal narratives and sense of identity. When a man goes through the experience of anima projection and retraction, his DMN is reorganized. He literally becomes a different person, and the woman who catalyzes that transformation remains associated with that moment of change. That's why she's unforgettable. She represents a version of the man that existed only in relation to her. Now, let's talk about what this means in practice, because understanding the theory is one thing, applying it is something else entirely. For the women who are watching, the first thing I need to say is this: you don't need to do anything to be unforgettable. You need to be who you really are. The feminine energy that captivates men on the level of the anima isn't performance. It's not a technique. It's not a relationship strategy. It's authenticity. It's the courage to be vulnerable. It's the ability to be present without an agenda. But to access that, many women need to undo years of conditioning. Modern society has taught women to compete with men, to suppress emotions, to always be strong, to never need anyone. These qualities can be useful in certain contexts, but they create an armor that blocks the natural feminine energy. And without that energy flowing, the woman can't activate the deep attachment circuits in the male brain. The protocol that Huberman would suggest starts with regulating the nervous system. Practices that reduce cortisol and increase oxytocin, diaphragmatic breathing, time in nature, genuine social connection, healthy physical touch. When a woman's nervous system shifts out of fight or flight mode and into rest and connect mode, her energy changes. She becomes more receptive, more present, more capable of deep emotional connection. And that change is noticeable to men. Even if they can't articulate what they're perceiving, they feel that this woman is different, that she has something that others don't. But what they're feeling is simply a woman in touch with her own femininity. For the men, the work is different, but equally important. If you can't forget a specific woman, the question isn't how to win her back. The question is, what does she represent to you that you haven't yet integrated into yourself? Jung would say that this woman activated your anima in a powerful way. And until you do the work of integration, you're going to keep searching for her. There are women like her, everywhere. The protocol starts with honest reflection. What qualities did this woman have that you admire? Creativity, intuition, emotional capacity, spiritual presence. These are the qualities that you need to develop in yourself. Huberman would add specific practices: journaling to access unconscious emotions, meditation to develop internal awareness, therapy to process attachment patterns formed in childhood. When a man does this work, something paradoxical happens. The unforgettable woman starts to lose her power over him, not because he's forgotten her, but because he's integrated what she represented. And here's the final irony. Men who have done this work of integration become infinitely more attractive to healthy women, because they're no longer seeking to be completed. They're already whole. And women who have done the work of reconnecting with their femininity become infinitely more unforgettable, because they're not trying to capture men. They're simply being who they are. This is the secret that Jung mapped and Huberman validated. The deepest attraction happens when two whole people meet, not two halves seeking completeness, two totalities choosing to share. And these connections leave permanent marks because they're rare, because most people never do the necessary work to become whole. They spend their lives seeking in others what they should cultivate in themselves. So, when two people who have done the work meet, something extraordinary happens. The 4 stages of the anima align. The 3 neural systems of Huberman harmonize, and the result is a connection that transcends the common, a connection that remains in the memory forever, not as obsession, not as a wound, but as a reminder of who you can be when you're in touch with your true nature. That's the feminine energy that men never forget. And that's the masculine integration that women recognize instinctively. 2 sides of the same coin, 2 aspects of the same process of individuation. But let me reveal something even deeper, something that Jung wrote in his works, but that is rarely discussed. The anima isn't static. It evolves throughout a man's life, and the women he meets in different phases of life represent different stages of that evolution. A man in his 20s might be completely captivated by a woman who represents Eve or Helen of Troy. Pure physical attraction, romantic fantasy, intensity without depth. But the same man in his 40s, if he has grown psychologically, will be attracted to something completely different. He'll seek Mary, Mother of Jesus, or Sophia. Nurturing presence, spiritual depth. A woman who catalyzes his transformation instead of simply satisfying his desires. And here's the tragedy that Jung observed repeatedly in his patients. Many men marry young, with a woman who represents the initial stages of the Anima, Eve or Helen of Troy, and as they mature, they begin to feel that something is missing. They can't name what it is, but they feel a void and a restlessness, a sense that there should be more. And then they meet a woman who represents Mary, Mother of Jesus or Sophia, and everything changes. That woman touches them in a way that their wife never could, not because the wife is inferior, but because she represents a stage of the Anima that the man has already surpassed internally. This isn't justification for betrayal. Far from it. What Jung was pointing out is that the work of Anima integration must be done internally, not through other women. A man who projects his evolving Anima onto different women throughout his life is avoiding the real work. He's outsourcing his psychological evolution to external sources. The healthy path is to develop all 4 stages of the Anima internally. Integrate the sexual, the romantic, the sacred, and the spiritual as aspects of himself. And when that happens, the man stops needing external women to represent those aspects for him. He becomes whole, and his wholeness attracts women who are also whole. Huberman would add a neurological perspective to this. As a man matures and does the work of integration, his brain changes. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for emotional regulation and mature decision-making, strengthens. The amygdala, the center of fear and emotional reactivity, becomes more regulated. That means neurologically mature men are less susceptible to intense Anima projection. They're able to see women as they really are, not as projections of unintegrated aspects of themselves. And paradoxically, that makes them better partners, because they're no longer looking to be saved or completed. They're looking to share a journey with an equal. Now, I'm going to tell you about the most controversial aspect of all of this, something that Jung wrote, but that's frequently misunderstood. Jung said that the Anima can be dangerous. When a man is completely dominated by his Anima, he loses touch with his masculinity. He becomes emotional in destructive ways. He makes decisions based purely on feelings, without considering logic or consequences. This is what happens when men become obsessed with women who represent elevated stages of the Anima, without doing the work of integration. They get lost. They abandon responsibilities. They destroy their lives in the name of a fantasy. The unforgettable woman can be a blessing or a curse. It depends on how the man responds to the experience. If he uses the experience as a catalyst for internal growth, to integrate his own femininity, to become more whole, then she's a blessing. She pushed him toward individuation, but if he gets stuck in the obsession, eternally projecting, seeking to replicate that experience with other women, then she becomes a curse, a wound that never heals, because he refuses to do the necessary work. And this is where practical advice becomes crucial. If you're a woman who wants to embody that unforgettable feminine energy, the work isn't about capturing men. It's about becoming the most authentic version of yourself. That means confronting your own feminine shadow, the parts of yourself that you hide or deny, the anger you repress, the sensuality you're ashamed of, the intuition you ignore, the vulnerability you disguise. When a woman integrates all these aspects, she emanates a completeness that's magnetic. She doesn't need to do anything to attract. She simply is. And that being is irresistible. If you're a man who can't forget a specific woman, the work isn't about winning her back. It's about understanding what she represented, and developing those qualities in yourself. That means confronting your own masculine shadow, the parts of yourself that you hide or deny, the sensitivity you suppress, the creativity you ignore, the spirituality you ridicule, the capacity for emotional connection that you avoid. When a man integrates all these aspects, he stops projecting. He stops seeking in external women what he should cultivate internally, and ironically, that makes him infinitely more attractive. Because women sense when a man is whole. They sense when he's not trying to use them to fill voids. And that wholeness is what they're really seeking, even if they can't consciously articulate it. So, the cycle completes. Whole women attract whole men. Whole men attract whole women. And when two whole beings meet, they create something that transcends the sum of its parts. A connection that's not based on need, but on choice, not on lack, but on abundance, not on projection, but on recognition. And these connections are truly unforgettable. Not because they activate old wounds, but because they represent the highest potential of what two people can create together. Now, I want to hear from you. Which woman from your past still lives in your mind? And more importantly, what do you think she was trying to teach you about yourself? Comment down below. Because this conversation is exactly the type of depth that Jung knew was necessary for true individuation. Team Anima versus Team Animus. Do you believe men project more than women? Or is the process the same for both genders? Tell me your experience in the comments. And if this video touched something deep inside you, consider supporting this work through super thanks. You just discovered the connection between Jung's 4 stages of the anima and Huberman's 3 neural systems. You saw how oxytocin, estrogen, and archetypal projection create permanent memories in the male psyche. Each revelation like this costs hours of research, connecting Jung with Huberman, connecting depth psychology with neuroscience. And when you click the golden heart, you're not just supporting financially. You're saying continue revealing what academia hides. Continue building these bridges that transform lives. Because the truth is, few channels have the courage to do this synthesis, to show that the mystical and the scientific are saying the same thing in different languages, to reveal that biological anthropologist Helen Fisher and her 3 systems of love directly validate what Jung wrote over 100 years ago. This work only continues with your support. Super thanks isn't just financial support. It's you saying that this content matters, that you want more revelations like this, that you're part of a community that seeks depth instead of superficiality. Until the next video, where we'll continue unraveling the secrets that Jung mapped and Huberman validated, the secrets of the human psyche, the secrets of the soul, the secrets of why some connections transform us forever, while others disappear as if they never existed. The answer is in the anima. The answer is in neuroscience, while the answer is in you.